We're going to start because we have a lot to cover. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the class. I'm super excited about this. We have Dan Holtzman here. He is the VP of Karis Appraisal. He's been working with Movement Mortgage for how many years now, Dan?
9. I've been at Karis for 9, so yeah, 9 years.
Yeah, he's great. I can contact him directly if I have any issues, super responsive. And then John is one of our PA appraisers that is on the list of appraisers, right? Dan, you guys, he's one of a PA appraisal. So he was nice enough to come on here as well so we could answer questions, go through the appraisal. We're going to have like an open forum here. What I'd like to do is we're going to start, I'm going to share my screen with the credit report. It's going to be empty. We're going to kind of go down it. Dan, John, I don't know who's going to guide it, but any questions, either raise your hand or just put something in the chat and then I can interrupt them because there's a lot to go through and I want to have a time for Q&A as well. Dan, you want to just say a couple words about yourself and then we'll do John and we'll get on to this.
Yeah, no, obviously I'm at Karis. I've been here 9 years. Worked with appraisers all over the country, basically, and was at Wells Fargo before this on the default side of residential valuations. So not the fun side, but this is a little bit more fun, I guess you could say. But yeah, been running operations here for the last pretty much 7 years. So we have a ton of appraisers. We treat our appraisers extremely well. We try and pay them fairly, pay them quickly, and treat them like humans. And it definitely goes a long way. I guess John can touch on that better than I can, but that's a big thing for us. You know, AMCs in general don't get the best reputation in the market from anybody, you know, appraisers, agents, LOs, just in general. But Karis is a little bit different in the way we approach it. We're not trying to make massive margins or anything like that. We have slim margins, but we try and take care of our appraisers, and in return, they kind of take care of the clients. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Excellent. John, you want to add anything?
I'm John Fields. I've been appraising just under about 20 years now. We do a lot of work for Karis, and he's absolutely right there.
You're hard to hear, John. Sorry to interrupt you, but I can barely hear you. You're very muffled. Still not good.
Yeah. Still not good? Oh, no.
It's just muffled and very low.
Okay. My laptop passed out on me, so I'm using my desktop at home. Is this any better?
No, it's a little better, but it's going to be hard to hear you.
Okay. That's probably a little because I don't know if there's any other way for me to be able to get this on right now. But I've been appraising for about 20 years. We do a lot of work for Karis. They handle us and treat us great. They pay us well on time. I can't say enough kind things about Dan and his group. As far as the appraisal goes, for reading the appraisal, I'll be happy to go through any questions anybody has and try to answer them as best as I can.
Okay. You're a little better. Everybody needs to raise their volume so I can hear them a little better. Dan, do you want me to pull this up and you start, or do we want John? Because we're having trouble hearing John, so I'm a little concerned. I don't want him not to be able to hear. So
you might be able to jump on your phone if you have the app or something like that. Maybe that's a possibility. That should be clear. But yeah, you can pull it up. I mean, the first page or so is pretty straightforward anyways.
Right.
John will probably be more helpful on the second pages. And third page is kind of what goes into the appraisal.
Okay. Let me just pull this up 1 second. Okay, I saved it on my desktop. Where is it? I'm just going to go back to your email, Dan. For some reason it didn't save. All right, I'm going to pull this up. Let me know if you guys can see this. I don't know about you guys, but my Wi-Fi is a little slow. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to find, I downloaded this appraisal that you gave. Dan, you just want to forward it to me again because I saved it and I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi, but just forward me that email again so I can just pull it up.
You're able to see my screen?
Yes.
Let's see. Yes, we just need a little bit bigger. Yeah. Okay, there we go. John, any better on the audio?
Trying to allow you know my phone.
It's
Yeah,
still-
so I'll jump in. You know, a lot of the stuff on the first page is pretty straightforward. You know, you have your property address bar where everything about the actual property, and a lot of the stuff will be pulled from tax assessor as well as MLS, and all the other data is kind of, some of this comes from the inspection. So, you know, things like owner occupied, tenant occupied, or vacant. As they have their inspection, they make notes as they go out to the property and make sure that they're marking those things down. You know, knowing whether it's in a PUD or not. You know, condo ownership. This is obviously a single family residence form. So this is the 1004, strictly for single family residents. And yeah, I mean, it's property address, borrower, who owns it now, who's going to buy it, the legal description, parcel IDs, all that. And then down here is where you have, you know, whether it's a purchase contract or a purchase or a refi or other, like a HELOC or whatever it may be, the lender and their address. And then typically down here is where you know, check mark yes or no. You know, if it's been offered for sale, and obviously typically ones that are for sale and for a contract, that's always going to be yes. And then also showing the data of where you got that from. Big thing in appraisal is obviously always showing where the data was verified from. They want to know that all the data is verified, you know, through a certain source, and explaining that source specifically. Little further down, making sure that they mark for purchases that they did analyze the contract of sale, and giving kind of the details of that. If there's anything they noticed, giving the actual contract price, the data contract, whether the seller is the owner of property, or if it's, you know, whatever it might be. In certain situations, it's not always purchase, and that's where you would give more information. Financial assistance like seller concession, buyer concessions, all that kind of stuff is all going to be labeled here, down here, and explained out. So basically up here is where you say, you know, it was listed for this price, an offer was made and accepted at contract price of this at this date. And this is just giving you an overview of not only like what the property is, but also the contract section for purchases. If it's a refi, all this stuff is, you know, irrelevant, obviously. This is all focused on the contract.
Dan, I'm
here-
going to stop you there, Dan, if you don't mind. I
Yeah.
have a question. I don't know about anybody else. I'm not an agent, so, you know, I look at these things, but now that we're looking in more depth, for me and for other people who might have thought about this question, the financial assistance. Now, we don't always have seller's assist and everything. Sometimes that happens later in the process. I'm just curious of why you would need that information if it's really just about appraising the value.
Yeah, so typically it does affect the value. In certain markets, it can have an effect on the value. You know, obviously the markets we've been in the past, you know, 3-4 years, you have COVID where, you know, concessions are not going to be coming from the seller because it's a seller's market. Right now, we're kind of more in that buyer's market range to where, you know, you may have some or you may not. Typically, it may be coming from the seller versus, you know, the buyer during
Right.
COVID.
That's what I figured.
So not to say that anything can have an effect, but I think you guys all know there's times that basically there was ways that whether it was a builder or whoever it might be, maybe offering large concessions to kind of offset the price of the home in a way or another. And that just has to be notated. It's not always an effect on value. It's not, you know, it really depends on how the market stands and how it's, everything in the appraisal report is focused on, you know, an opinion of value for the average buyer. So everything is looked at as the average buyer. It's not looked at as the person who, you know, they have one gold mirror in their house and it's like, I'm going to pay an extra 10 grand because I have to have that mirror and live in that house. Like that's not the average buyer. That's specific to that buyer. So as they look out, and that's kind of obviously a ridiculous one, but there's obviously in every house, there's certain aspects that people love, don't love, and they're willing to pay a little bit more for. But when it comes to value, how do you look at that at a value standpoint? It's probably not a value add for the typical buyer or average buyer in the market. So
And-
that's, yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Oh my
All
God,
right,
that's so
perfect.
much better.
Awesome. The
Thank
other
you.
part of it too is the client for these reports is the bank for us. So if it's an FHA loan, there's a cap on the amount of concessions that they're allowed to build into the contract. So if it's a $200,000 sale and they try to put 70 grand in concessions in, obviously that's not going to fly with FHA or some of the financing options that people are going for on these loans. So
And that's a good point, John. Some of you who don't know, and I just had this conversation with an agent. When you're doing a conventional loan, you guys, new agents especially, 3% down. Conventional goes by your down payment of how much seller's assist concessions you can do. So 3% down, you can only do 3% of the contract price for a seller's assist. FHA allows 6% across the board. So very important that you guys know that when you're negotiating seller's assist and stuff like that, because it's not just across the board for every program. So that was a good point, John.
Yeah,
Does the seller's concession match the down payment for the conventional?
No, it doesn't always match it. Like, so 3% would be 3%. I believe it's after 10%, it's a 6% flat rate.
Okay.
Under 10%, 3%, over 10% down is a 6%. There's no max. Whereas FHA, 3.5% down, 6% down, seller's assist across the board, which is nice because it's much higher now.
That's where, like, obviously when rates kind of skyrocketed back up, you saw a lot of these, buy down products from lenders, from builders, and sometimes the concessions were used towards that buy down, and that was kind of agreed upon between the buyer and the seller as a way to get a lower rate, but also continue to pay the same contract price, but also in a sense pay, more or less based on making that buy down work into it. So those are considerations when it comes to looking at adjustments later on in the report, that there'll be times that there's $10,000 in concessions and there's no adjustment, but there's also times that there is, when comparing to the comparables that are used, if it's clear that the concessions were used to whether inflate or deflate the price of the home, there will be adjustments made on those. Appraisal to appraisal, every appraisal is different, obviously.
Correct. And I just wanted to add too, I'm sorry, just once, I don't know, I can't see anybody now because I see the contract, but just so you guys know, it's really important that when an appraisal comes back, and most of you who worked with me, I do give you a heads up of what came in, but it always has to go through our movement appraisal department, be reviewed and approved. And sometimes we have to go back and get revisions. It could be a minor revision. It could be a major revision that could affect value. So just know that when the appraisal comes in, doesn't mean it's approved. It's got to go through our appraisal department, and that's with every lender.
Hi, this is Glenn. I'm just curious. Hey there. I'm just kind of curious back to Maria's original question, because I was thinking the same thing. When I think of appraisals, I think of the property and its comparison to other market value properties, I guess, sold in the area over a period of time. How do you think everything we talked about to me seem like outside of that, buy downs and concessions and down payment assistance and builders, how do they all roll into the appraisal? I didn't really find the connect.
This first section that we're looking at right now is more providing information to our client about the property that we are appraising. So this isn't necessarily in our comparative analysis of what the value of that particular home is worth, but more letting the client, our bank, know that it's under contract for this amount. Here are the seller concessions, and letting them know so that when they're analyzing that for their loan, they have all of the specifics for that particular property. As far as concessions and how they matter for value, it's typically the concessions on the comparable sales I'm using. So if I have a sale in the neighborhood, I have 3 sales in the neighborhood, but one of them sold with 30,000 in concessions, which would be excessive for the market, I'm most likely making an adjustment for that. If it's something small, 3% or under, I'm typically not making an adjustment, because that could be for things like closing costs, minor defects in, roofing or siding, or something that came across during the home inspection that I wouldn't necessarily know about. But the concessions don't really come into play as far as value goes until I'm actually looking at those comparable sales and what their concessions were.
All right, thanks. That kind of helps it piece it together.
We'll
problem.
touch on it on the next page for sure, because that's when you're basically comparing the subject to all the comp sales. So anything that goes into those comp sales, if there is a 30,000 adjustment for concession, or not adjustment, but there's a $30,000 seller concession, the appraiser has to look at that and say, okay, well, why was there a concession? Is that something that affected the marketability of this house, or was it kind of, like I said, inflating something to help with the loan, or was it just that's the deal that got it done? You never really know, but the appraiser's looking at all the different factors that go into that, and at that point they decide whether adjustment is necessary or not.
Okay.
And I
Yeah,
just looked
thanks.
up, you guys, just so you know, I just looked up compliant for max seller's assist. So conventional actually under 10% is 3% of the purchase price, 10 to 25% is 6%, and 25% or more is 9%. These are primary and secondary homes. Investment is 15%. If they're putting more than 15, they get 2% seller's assist. So I'm going to actually, there's FHA, USDA, and VA. I'm going to send this out to all of you. So you have this nice little chart so you guys can know ahead of time what your max seller's assist, depending on the sales price and the down payment. So just so you know, I'll send that out to all you guys.
I'll let John kind of touch on some of this stuff. A lot of it is straight information, just as I said above, it's pulled from, whether this stuff's not typically from the contract, it's typically more from MLS, tax assessor, property record cards, all that kind of stuff, but just information about the home.
So
Okay.
I'll just go section by section. If you look on the left-hand side of the page, you can see that black line that says neighborhood. So that part of the report is all about the market, the neighborhood for the subject property. So I analyzed the neighborhood boundaries would go in there. That'd be like, it's surrounded by this route to the north, Route 76 to the south, basically laying out the boundaries of what the market area is for our subject property. Next to that, I have to analyze the overall housing trends for the entire market. So it's our highs, lows, and predominant values of homes, high, low, and predominant age of homes, and then what the percent land use is for that market area. So somewhere like Philadelphia, it's going to be, about 80 to 85% one unit, 5% or so of 2 to 4 unit, another 5% of multifamily, another 5% of commercial, and then that other space will be, parks and government buildings and things like that would be, 3 to 5%. If I'm in somewhere more rural, obviously those numbers change. A lot of that other is now used for agricultural or farming, or it could be open, it could be woodlands or state parks or whatever it may be. And your percentage of commercial and multifamily and all of those other housing areas all decrease in relation when you get more rural. So depending on your market area, those numbers can change anywhere. I'd say most of our area is more than 50% developed, so you're not going to see more than 50% in the other. But it can go from as small as 5% up to about 50%, depending on the market area in Southeast PA. For the neighborhood description, I'm usually explaining the school district, the area that they're in, so where are major areas of employment. So again, if you're in Berks County, it's going to be Reading and Collegeville and those areas. And then lastly is that market conditions. And that's where I'm analyzing whether the market is currently increasing, decreasing, stable, what the housing supply looks like, how many months of supply do we have. Typically, if it's 6 months, that is about a stable, stable marketing time for a property. Is usually have about 6 months of supply. If you get less than 6 months supply, it indicates more of a seller's market. And if there's over 6 months of supply, it typically represents a buyer's market. The more houses on the market, the more options that a buyer has, the more they're in control of the market. When there's only 2 or 3 homes on the market, typically those sellers are in control and get more than typical.
John, I have a question for you. Do you welcome, so if someone is an agent is doing an appointment and meeting you there to let you in, do you welcome information like comps? Do you welcome MLS?
I want everything.
Good.
Give me all your
Some
comps.
appraisers
give
don't
me-
like that. I know you guys are really good, but some appraisers don't like it. But I know from Dan, he tells me that appraisers that work for Karis welcome any information, which is
It
great.
makes no sense to me at all, because if I send something in and I learn about something later when you reconsider my value, it just makes me look bad and it makes it more difficult to get things right.
Right.
So meet me. I tell every agent, meet me at your appointment. Come with every piece of information you want to bring: market
Good.
analysis, sales, comparables, any recent improvements to the property, anything you think I should know that is going to help me. Bring it. I want.
That's great.
Bring me a packet. I'd love to have all the information, because I'm going to do my job. I mean, I'm going to go back, take a look for my comps. I'm going to do my search the way I typically do. But if I don't find, if I'm not getting to the sales price, the first place I'm going to dig is into the stuff that you brought me.
Excellent.
And sometimes, you know, the map function on Bright isn't great. Every now and then there's a property that's a half a mile away that shows up 3 miles away when you run the map search. So
Right.
there are things that I've sometimes missed. Having the agents bring that information, I jump right in there and say, "Oh man, I can't believe I missed this." I can put
Great.
that into the report, and that shows that, you know, it's worth this. So yes,
Excellent. Any
always
questions,
bring anything.
anyone from so
Yeah,
far?
I have one question, John. Do you use, obviously you get most of your comps from the MLS, but do you also research ones that were like for sale by owners, off-market properties?
No, so we typically don't use off-market properties unless it's unless there is no other comparable sales that have sold on the open market. The reason for that is I don't know the conditions of the sale. They
Right.
could have sold that property fully furnished. They could have left both cars in the garage. They could have given them $80,000 in concessions that I wouldn't know
Yeah,
about.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. All right, let's keep moving.
Yep. So the next area is our site area. It's asking for the dimensions of the lot that it's on, how large the parcel is, so how many acres. For shape, it's typically irregular, unless you're in a major city where they'll be rectangular. For the view, and it gets a little bit confusing with the UAD model. You'll have either an A, an N, or a B to start that. So A would be adverse, N would be neutral, B would be beneficial. So adverse views would be things like if it backs to the turnpike, if it backs to a power plant or a commercial property. Neutral would be your typical residential home. So something that backs up to other homes, that typical residential view. Your beneficial view are going to be things like if you back to woods or a creek or a park, golf courses, things like that. And that'll have an impact on the next page when I compare it to other properties. If I have something that has an adverse view, such as like a turnpike view, I need to have a comparable sale that has a similar view.
I've
If
had
I-
that problem in the past, John, and it was really tough. The buyer came to me, went to 2 other lenders, and none of the lenders could get an appraiser to get, because it was literally a unique property that there was nothing to compare it to. It was such a shame. He ended up having to pay cash because of it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like 3 different lenders tried, and it was just, yeah. So the adverse is that's hard to deal with. Robin's got a picture. Does the shape have any effect? Is a question from Robin.
Typically, no. I can't think of an area where I've made an adjustment or anything that for shape, unless the lot size. We run in this every now and then in cities where the lot size is smaller than the actual width of a house or a dwelling, or
Okay.
a garage hangs over the edge of an actual property line, things like that. But as far as shape goes, not typically, no.
Good questions, Robin. Okay.
Yeah. Zoning's next. So it's just if it's single family, if it's condominium, or if it's multifamily, that's all we do. We're residential only, so I don't do anything commercial or anything like that. The description will explain that. So most places around here, it'll be like R-10 for single family, and then I'll write single family zoning. The condo changes county to county, but something like R-55 or something like that, and I would explain in that zoning description that it was condominium ownership. Next down is the zoning compliance. Legal just means that the use currently meets the allowable uses under that zoning. Legal non-conforming means that it has gotten its own individual approval to not match the current zoning. So for example, something that has like an in-law suite that cannot be rented out, can't be can't be used as income producing. A lot of those show up as legal non-conforming, in which they are registered under single family, but they're actually 2 units, so it'd be called an accessory dwelling unit that gets grandfathered use and gets allowed to be used there, not necessarily transferable. Illegal zoning would be something like a duplex on a single family lot that has not been approved.
Right.
99% of the time when that comes up, the bank doesn't want me to complete the report. So I usually don't click that box, because if I have to click that box, they're usually canceling the order.
I have a comment on both of those. Grandfathered use. I did a renovation. You guys know, most of you know that I did. I ripped a property down. It was considered a renovation because I was keeping the existing foundation. Turns out when the inspector township came out, they wouldn't let me continue because of the contractor screwed up. And they said that I had to rip out the second floor because the steps were not compliant. I ended up going back and getting grandfathered use of those steps because it wasn't new construction. It was considered renovation. So I got to continue, thank God. So renovation loans, very important, that we make sure we're doing that correctly. And as far as the illegal, I notice this a lot, unfortunately, in some of these mobile homes that are turned into single family. They're not single family. I had one that they added a structure to make it 2-family. It was not. And unfortunately, they were labeled on Zillow as a 2-family unit, and it was not at all a 2-family unit. So you guys have to be really careful, because unfortunately, Zillow is not putting that descriptions properly, and finding out later in the process. So be very aware of properties that are not legal.
On to the next section, we're looking at the highest and best use is next. For us as residential, it's always going to be residential or condominium, whatever it may be, or multifamily. This is where, if you do have something that is legal non-conforming, I have to explain that it's currently the highest and best use, but it may not be transferable. So if you have something with an in-law suite, they might not necessarily let you sell it as an in-law suite. You should speak to your township if you have that. And then this is also where, if you have something that's a mixed use property that's allowed to be used either way, you're going to have a general appraiser determine if it's the best use to be used as a residential or a commercial property. But again, that's not something I can do. To the next part of the site, I'm just analyzing all of the utilities. 99.9% of everything that we do has public electricity. Gas will vary, whether it's propane in ground or natural gas or none available. The water and sewer is where you run into a lot of questions with FHA. So if there is public water or sewer available to a property and it's financially feasible to connect to it, FHA is going to want you to connect to it every time. Financial feasibility, I believe, is 3% or less of the sales price. I'm not certain if that is still the case or not, but I believe it's 3%. And I have to, on every FHA, if they are well and septic, I have to call the township and the water supplier and find out if it's available and how much the average connection costs are. To the next part for the street, just whether it's macadam, gravel, concrete, what kind of street it has, and whether it's public or private. The private roads are usually something that's shared along like an easement. They will actually have a name, but the owners on that street are responsible for its maintenance and its upkeep. And then same thing with the alley. Alleys are typically usually public in most places where we see them. Next part is a FEMA cert. So we run a flood map with every report we do. That kicks me out what the flood zone is, if it's currently in a flood zone, when the map was produced. This is important for the lender to know in case they need to get insurance. Typically homes that are in the flood zone for FEMA require that flood insurance if you're getting mortgage. So this is more, again, like the concessions up top to let our lender know, hey, you might not know this, but this is in a 500-year floodplain. It's something that you're going to need to get addressed before closing. Are the city utilities and site improvements typical for the market area? Again, this is typically yes. I have done one property that was completely off grid that was solar panels and generators and had no public electricity, to be honest. They ran everything off of propane or solar power. And then for that case, I had to click no, and it became difficult to appraise at that point because the lender wanted another property off the grid. But typically for most of your homes, this is going to be yes, they conform to the market area.
That's
And
pretty
I'm gonna add to
interesting.
that, you guys, super.
People living off the grid.
Go ahead,
That's
I
Rob.
kind of
missed
cool
that.
to try to have to appraise something like that.
Yes, well, I didn't know it was off the grid until I got there. Or I probably would have asked for it to be reassigned just because I didn't have that much familiarity with it. And I ran into difficulty actually finding comps that were the same. I ended up using a log cabin that ran purely off of a generator, and it ended
Wow.
up working out. But yeah, it was definitely one of the more interesting and difficult appraisals that I've done.
And on the mortgage end, you guys, when there's solar panels, I'm sure most of you know, there sometimes is a lease. It's a lien on the property. So when I hear about solar panels, I'm immediately asking for the agreement. I have to count the payment of that solar panel agreement if the buyers are taking it over as part of their debt to income. So as soon as you see something with solar panels and with your lender, make sure your lender is aware of it. It might be paid off, it's fine, but a lot of times it is a continued payment that the buyers will have to take over. And you want to make sure the buyers are aware that that is an extra payment they will be taking on. So just a heads up on solar panels, super important.
Can I ask a general question about heat?
Yes.
Okay, so I had a situation where a buyer was purchasing, it was a conventional loan, and the seller's home had a sort of like a pot belly kind of thing, downstairs with, the holes in the ceiling was a ranch, and
Yep.
they had basically disabled all of the electric baseboard heaters in every room. And for conventional financing, the seller was asked to put a permanent heat source in every room. Is that going to be something we always need to have, no matter what
Yes.
the loan? Okay.
Yeah, so conventional, or in order for me to call it gross living area, it needs to be finished like gross living area and heated with a permanent programmable thermostat. So that can either be electric baseboard, it can be electric hot, it can be any kind of hot air system. But they are really cracking down on me. So there are a lot of like smaller boroughs that have like passive heat where they'll have a boiler in the basement and the hot air comes to the first floor, and the second floor will just have open grates. And a lot of our banks are pushing back on those even now and asking for, we understand that they have the grates in there, but we want to have a programmable heating source in every bedroom. So they're making the people install the electric baseboard heat in a lot of those.
So as
Is
an
it-
agent, we really need to pay attention to our sellers' disclosures to make sure that we know what we're selling.
Yes. Yeah.
Very
Because it
much
could
so,
create a
Kristen.
financing problem.
Yes.
What's that?
Very much so.
Yes, yes.
The more you guys look at stuff, the more that you guys are educated, the smoother these things will go. If there's something, that and I can put a note in for the appraiser when we do the order, like we're all a team here, right? But that appraiser is going out sometimes an hour or two drive each way. So the better he's educated on everything we can give him. And like he said, he's welcome on anything you can give him. That way, when he has to do a revision, he doesn't have to drive back out. Because some of these revisions I'm seeing with some of these appraisers are really minor and they could have been avoided for another trip out there. So the more you can help the appraiser, the better. Correct, John?
Absolutely. Yes.
Good
Yeah.
question, Kristen.
So
Can
I
I
have
ask
Yeah,
a
one other
Kristen,
quick
just-
question? Sorry.
Oh.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Oh, I was just going to ask John if there was a specific reason, because I think I grew up in an old Victorian house in Allentown, New Jersey, and I think we had that situation that is no longer allowed. Like I don't think we had the programmable. I had this like octopus thing in the basement, and we had
Yep.
the grates, and it was an old colonial house. I guess it was colonial. And is there a reason? Is it safety? What's the reason for that?
Yeah, so it's safety. It's also the condition of the property. So if you're in Allen, there's a lot of them in Allentown. So a lot of the old row homes in Allentown have passive heat
Right.
to the second floor. So what they're worried about is that if the temperature gets down to 10 degrees and there's plumbing in any of those walls that you're now trying to heat with a passive heat source, they're afraid that those pipes might freeze. They could cause damage to the structure. So that's part of it. The other part of it is safety. So the minimum, I think it needs to be able to heat it to 60 degrees or more,
Mm.
and be The other part of it is they want it to be able to run while you're not home. So if you
Right.
decide to go on vacation, you decide to leave the property for a week, there's something that you can leave, and the inside of that house will be 60 degrees the whole time you're gone.
Right. Well, you gotta worry about
Kerosene
pipes and
heaters.
stuff.
Huh?
You gotta worry
Space
about pipes
heaters
freezing,
don't,
you know? Pipes can freeze. That happens
and I
when,
can't
Yeah.
use space heaters unless the only thing I can use is anything that's permanent. So it can't be a plug-in. It's got to be hardwired into the house
Right.
and built into the actual wall.
Okay.
and
Can
that
I ask
goes.
one other quick question
Mhm.
that you, regarding the road maintenance? I know that road maintenance agreements, back years and years ago, were a very big deal, especially when foreclosure was all the rage. It became a requirement. Are appraisers noting things like that, like road agreements, lack of road agreements, and is this causing an issue for financing? Because I had to actually go and get a whole street to sign off on something and have it recorded in order to close on a deal
Yes.
a long time ago. So I just wanted to know if that's something that's still a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're on a shared private road or you have an easement that have other homes using that area, you're going to need a written agreement between all of the parties that use that road. So typically it transfers with every sale. So typically, if your seller digs around in their last purchase agreement, they can find it. But
Right.
yeah, it's something that the mortgage companies are very interested in, because if you're the last house on that driveway and the road collapses or sinks or you get
Yeah.
a sinkhole or whatever, and now you can't access your property, it's obviously a big expense, and they want to make sure that, it's shared amongst everybody who's using that road.
Yeah, Kristen, I had that happen with a couple loans in the last 6 months, and we definitely needed an agreement. One seller had the agreement, and another one, they had to make up an agreement, and we accepted it, which was fine. But another good question, but
Yeah.
definitely an issue because it's a liability if there's multiple people sharing things. Some people, don't do their part, and some people don't. I'm sorry. It doesn't
Right.
matter.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think, John, I don't want to cut you off, but I think a lot of this is basically property focused. So I want to get ahead just to make sure that we hit on the important points
Yeah.
for, especially from an agent standpoint.
Great.
I mean, obviously this is all, basement, how everything is condition of stuff. This all comes into effect into the grid. But this is basically just reporting data as inspected, as well as online sources and things like that. So this doesn't really have much effect other than reporting what the house is. And then obviously down here, this is important, but it's also on the next page as well, room counts, bath counts, as well as square footage and stuff. And then obviously additional features, any deficiencies on the home. It's basically mentioning anything that they see may be an issue on the home, and bringing that to the attention of the lender, as well as just in general, the borrower. Then this is really the page that I think is the most, important for, at least on the lending side and the agent side and the borrower
Yes.
side. This is where you get all the data of how the values actually come together when it comes to appraising a house. So I'll let John jump in on this part.
That's perfect. Yeah, so this is where we do all the comparable analysis between the sales that I picked to compare your subject property to. Up at the top, address, sales price. The data sources are the MLS and public records typically. And then once we get below that description.
Oh, you're muted.
Where'd he go?
You're muted by accident.
I can't see him. I only see this. John?
He just muted his phone by accident.
Did someone mute him or did he mute himself? I didn't mute him. Trying to find him.
Hi, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what I did. So hopefully that stays the same. Can you see my video?
Yes,
Yep.
we can see you
Okay.
now. Good.
All right. So yes, underneath that description area, where it says seller financing concessions, that's where I'm analyzing seller concessions for the comparables. The date of sale, when you're reading the appraisal, it looks kind of weird. It'll have like an S and then a month/year, and then a semicolon, and then a C, which will have means contract and a month/year. So that's us analyzing when it sold. If you're an increasing market or a decreasing market, any adjustments for the increase or decrease since that contract date will be made on that line next to it. So you see the plus minus adjustment next to description. That's where the right hand side on the comparables are the adjustments. The left hand side is what that comparable has. So what they if they have a beneficial view, things like that. So as we move down the left, the location is if it's on a busy road or if it's a waterfront property, those things will come up in the location. Leaseholder fee
Just to,
simple.
sorry, just to jump in on the date of sale, because I think this comes into confusion a lot of times, is there's a separate form that's kind of been abandoned, but we still require it for our lenders, is the 1004 MC that gives you the market conditions. And typically that'll tell you whether the market's declining, increasing, or stable. And a lot of times people will question, especially outside of the appraisal world, why there's an adjustment in these boxes for date of sale and time. So if you're in an increasing market and say you're using a comp from 6 months ago, the appraisers will calculate the fact that the market's increased since that time and give a positive adjustment there. Just as in a declining market, a lot of times we'll see negative adjustments, and that kind of drives people crazy, obviously. But if it's a declining market and it hasn't sold for a while or isn't recent sale, there can be adjustments there, and that has an effect on value. So that's something that can come into play when looking at the comparables as well.
I have a general question. I know we got 15 minutes left, but real quick, because I get this from agents all the time because their sellers might be doing some renovation. Can you give us a couple add-ons or renovations that add value to a house that's going to be appraised? Like, is it a kitchen, a new roof, or a new? That's the top question. People are like, hey, my sellers, and oh, they just renovated it. Well, new carpet's not going to make the value up 50 grand. So can you just real quick just touch on what are the major things that cause an increase in value?
Kitchens and baths are still the biggest thing.
Okay.
They're even on that first page of that report. For every lender, I have to let them know when the kitchen and when the bath were last remodeled.
Great.
The next biggest things are usually any kind of external feature like a porch, patio, deck, pool, finished basements. Unfortunately, mechanicals and roof and things that aren't glamorous typically don't drive as much return on value as the things that are.
What about a fence?
Fences typically don't add much value at all.
Okay, good.
We're seeing a lot of people move in. If there's an old wood fence, they're ripping it down. They'd rather see their view.
It's
They
good
can
to
put
know,
in.
because people are putting new fences up sometimes and they think it's adding, they're paying 15 grand and they think it's adding 15 grand value to the house, though. That's good to know.
And
What
it's
about
not.
pools?
It really, your typical buyer, every buyer when they walk in and see a new kitchen are wowed by a new kitchen. Not every buyer wants a fenced backyard. If they don't have a dog or they don't have kids and they want to be able to see their views
Right.
and appreciate their backyard, they might not want the fence at all. So you're not going to see as much return on it.
You said the pool, though, pool adds value?
Pool adds value, but nowhere near what you pay for them typically.
Nope.
So not everybody wants a pool, but the people who do are willing to pay extra for it. So if the pool's a requirement for your buyer, they're going to outbid somebody that the pool's not. But so you're typically seeing on like a typical colonial, you're seeing about a 10 to 20 grand bump for having a pool.
Okay.
That probably costs that seller 80 to 100 to put in.
Obviously, in-ground pool.
Yes,
Yeah.
obviously in ground. Above ground is considered personal property, does not
Okay.
come in at all.
And everything has to be backed up by what the market is showing a reaction to. So if the market shows no reaction to, same exact house, one has a pool, one doesn't, and it's the same price, there wouldn't be an adjustment there. Obviously, that's not going to happen typically, but everything the appraiser puts in the report has to be backed up by how that's, what the market is reacting to. So if there's no reaction to a fence like he's talking about, it's not going to add any value. It has to be supported by what's shown in the comparables and just that market in general of what truly adds value. And typically, like he said, anything that's expected to be in a house, HVAC, all that type of stuff, even on renovation loans, you're not getting any value out of that because it's what's already expected to be in the home as you appraise it.
We got 10 minutes left. I think we're gonna get cut off like automatically. So we got to zoom through this finish this up, and then if we have any questions, I just don't want to be cut off in the middle of it. That would just be weird.
No problem. So I'll run
have a
some of the ones that I usually get questioned on. So I'm just going to jump right down to condition. So condition, there's a 1 through 6 rating system that we have to use now. So C1 is new construction. C6 is properties that probably should be condemned. C2 are your renovated homes. C3 and C4 are your more typical homes, average condition. C3 usually has some updates to their kitchens and bathrooms, where C4 they might be a little bit more dated. And then C5 is your fixer upper, the one that we need to take down to the studs and renovate now.
Okay.
So those are the questions I usually get about the C1, C2, C3. The next part, I'm going to jump down to basement and finished. So in that area, I'm going to put in the first number will be the total amount of basement area. So it'll be like 800 square feet. The next number will be how many square feet of that is finished. So
That
if
makes
it's
sense.
800 square feet and then 600 square feet of finish, and then whether it's an interior or a walkout. So if it's a walkout basement interior or a walk up where it's like a Bilco door. Below that is the rooms below grade, which is also written like a code. So there's rec rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, and other rooms. So when you're looking at that line, it'll say like 1 RR, that's 1 rec room, 0 BR, 0 bedrooms, 0.0 baths means 0 baths, and then 0 for the other rooms.
And just to jump in on the below grade, I know we're running on time, but this is a huge question we get from agents, especially is the house is 5,000 square feet. That's what we listed it as, and that includes the basement. But from an appraisal standpoint, it has to be reported separately, and it's not going to be shown as 5,000 square feet up here. It's going to be say 3,500 and then 1,500 below grade, and it's all reported differently with different adjustments and matching your comparable sales to that. So that's a big piece in the appraisal where there's some confusion of what the actual square footage of the house is. Anything below grade, or I think it's 50%, that's below ground. You have those split level houses and things that kind of come out into the basement, or not a basement per se. All that'll be reported in these boxes, and that's not considered true GLA from an appraisal standpoint. Obviously, selling the house and buying the house, it's livable space. It's just not reported that way.
I'm going to answer
Yes.
a question in the chat. Do we share reports to agents? No. The appraisers has to report it back to the lender. As a lender, we have to then let our agent know, the buyer's agent. I do not ever send appraisal to a seller's agent ever. It is the property of the buyer. They get it, and then they can share with whoever they want, but the appraisers never give it to the agents ever. They have to get it back to the lender.
The only case in which I give it,
Yes.
the only case in which I give
Maria,
it to an agent is if they hired me to do like a pre-listing or something like that.
Right. Kristen?
I just wanted to let you know, I reached out to Colleen. You're not going to be cut off in any capacity. Just go as long as you need to go.
Thank you. I
Oh,
was
awesome.
trying to email Linda at
You're
the
welcome.
front desk because this is going well and I didn't really want to cut it off. So thank you.
Yeah, no,
Kristen.
we're enjoying it. All right. Thank you. I just
Thank
wanted to
you.
let
All
you know
right.
that.
So we're not rushed.
welcome.
That's good. All right.
And I don't want to
Keep
speak for
going, keep
Dan.
going.
I don't want to speak for Dan because I don't know what he has, but I have nothing else today. So
Yeah,
you can keep me on
I'm
here.
pushing my leadership meeting out another 15 minutes, so we're good.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. The rest of that, the rest of those things on the comparable grid are pretty self-explanatory. What kind of heating and cooling does it have? Does it have any energy efficient items, solar panels, insulated windows, geothermal heat, anything like that? How many car garage or carport do you have? And then what your exterior porches, patios, decks, things like that. Those 3 blank lines below there are where the appraiser can make adjustments for things that are unique. So it'll be things like pools, accessory dwelling units, like an in-law suite. Those kind of things will often show up if it's something unique about that home. Will show up on those 3 lines, and then I'll make adjustments for that for each comparable, if they have that feature or if they don't.
Excellent. I wanted to touch base real quick. This is very important. A lot of agents ask me this. They're worried that the appraiser won't praise it because there's something, paint or a peeling paint or a handrail. The appraiser, and John confirmed this, the appraiser is always going to appraise the value. If there's a final inspection needed for safety or something, they're just going to note that on. And then as a lender, I am then letting the buyer's agent and buyers know, hey, this is the value, but in order to get this appraisal approved, this final inspection has to be done. It could be something simple, it could be something big, but they always are going to appraise it for the value with as if this is going to be fixed. Correct, John?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the value is as if those repairs are already
Correct.
done.
And we have, it's my job to make sure that the agents and the buyers get it done. It can be done by the seller or the buyer. We don't care. We just have to prove the appraiser sometimes has to go back out. I just did a letter of attestation where the agent went out. They just had to put some outlets and they had to put a panel, and it didn't need a contractor. We got receipts, we got pics, and a letter from the buyer saying it has been done, and we accepted it as a lender. It was fantastic. So it's not always something major that an appraiser has to go out and then they have to pay for a reinspection. So always talk to your lender about anything like that.
Perfect. Now on the comparables, I'll be making adjustments on the right-hand side for any differences that it has to the subject property. And again, like Dan said, those adjustments are based off of what we call paired sales. So if I'm making an adjustment for something like an in-law suite or a pool, I need to have a comparable sale that has that feature so that I can show what that feature is worth. So that when I go back to the bank and say I gave 20 grand for a pool, they're going to say, where's your proof that it's worth 20 grand? I'm going to have at least one comparable sale with that feature to be able to show the bank, hey, comp one has a pool and it shows that it's worth this much when I make the adjustments to the others.
And just from our standpoint on the AMC side, as we're reviewing these reports, one of the things we do look at, and my team, I make sure they look at is the net and the gross adjustment on the report and the percentages. Perfect report, 0% across the board because you're not making any adjustments. Everything's perfect. Never happens, obviously. Typically you want to be in that anywhere from 0 to 10% is typically a good sign, but you're not always going to be there either. So one of the things we flag on our side is anything over that, typically 30 to 40% in, adjustment percentage, because that tells me either it was an extremely hard report or the appraiser probably didn't do their job and just, put in a bunch of comps that maybe aren't the best comps. Not always the case. Typically in rural markets, things like that, you're just naturally going to see those, percentage of adjustments very high because there's not a lot of similar sales. And obviously how that's calculated is, say, the home sells for 500K up here. This is notated up here that it sold for 500K. Say it's much nicer than this house. So there's positive adjustments for square footage, room counts, has a basement, there's a pool, there's porch, patio, garage. Ends up adjusting to say 625,000 or even higher, say 700,000. That's going to have a large net adjustment, and that's going to show up here showing us, okay, well, is this really similar? Because there's a lot of adjustments that were made, and if you're having to adjust that much, is it really the best comp for that subject property? That might be a little confusing, but typically that's one of the things we look at, and it kind of tells us how good the comps are. And obviously we know the markets just as the appraiser does. We don't question it when it's a Hills Have Eyes property in Tennessee that is, in the middle of nowhere and nothing's like it. That's just what we see and what we look at. And as an appraiser, I'm sure they try and keep those adjustments down as much as possible, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So
I have a question in the chat. Does a well or a public water affect the value? Good question, Tobias.
Only if I can show it in the market. So I'd say typically no. Most areas where you have well water, I'm going to have comparable sales that are also on well water. Right. Most places that have, if the public water is available, most people have connected by now. I am in certain markets where it's like kind of a mix, where I will have sales that have public water versus ones that have well water. If there is a market reaction to it and I can show it, I can make an adjustment. But I've never made one. So I've never really seen it to where a typical buyer is, that much willing to pay for having the same house be on public water instead of well.
Excellent. All right. There you go, Tobias. All right. We're almost done. We going down a little bit more here.
Yep. So the next area is I just analyzed the last time the subject property and the comparable sales have sold. and that is to show that the house isn't being flipped. So that part of it is to show for the subject property, show the mortgage company, hey, the last time this transfer was 10 years ago. It didn't just transfer 30 days ago. And this is the last transfer that I'm showing in public records. So that if something different, if the lender's finding something different with the title, anything like that, they can flag it and make sure that the actual seller is the one selling the property. For the comparables, it's to show the last time they transferred and any change in value. So if comparable one sold a year ago for 400 grand less, they're going to ask what happened. Why is this selling for $400,000 more now than it did a year ago? And this typically happens on like your flips and renovated properties. That's right. Analyze it. Analyze those prior sales. And next up for the summary sales comparison approach, this is where I explain all of my adjustments. So I'll, in that area, it'll end up being in the addendum because it's so long, but I'll put in there how much I adjusted per square foot of living area, how much I adjusted per acre of site size, where I'm getting those from. I'll also explain if I didn't make an adjustment. So if there's a small, like 1/10 of an acre difference between yours and somebody else's property, I'm probably not making an adjustment for it. And I'll explain in there why we don't see buyers typically react to differences that small. Moving on to the
So
next. Go ahead.
there's no set adjustments for any market, any appraiser, anything like that. I think there's been confusion to where, you know, one somebody sees, well, there's a bathroom adjustment that's automatically $5,000. It's all based on that market. Every appraiser has their own, you know, calculation of how they do that, you know, as well as looking at how that market specifically reacts to that, having an extra bath or having an extra 300 square feet. So there's no set amount, because we've had some rebuttals come back and reconsideration values where they're saying, well, the last report I had, you know, there was a $10,000 adjustment for this bathroom, and here I'm showing 2,500. Like that needs to be changed to 10,000, and that's not correct. It's every appraisal is different, every appraiser is different, every market's different, and everything's based on how that market specifically reacts to every single feature on the home.
Absolutely. And so for us, like we have 8 appraisers in our office. So we all try to stay, I basically handle Berks, Montgomery, and Chester counties. We have other appraisers that handle everything up through Scranton. We're into Jersey now, Philadelphia. What I try to do is I keep my appraisers in certain markets so that they understand that market well, so that they do have an idea of what that paired sales should look like, so that when they do that analysis, they can figure that out. The other thing that we have with having that many people in the office, sometimes we overlap some. We can talk to each other. I have other appraisers to bounce it off of. But hey, I think that, you know, the built-in barbecues on these patios are increasing what my patio adjustment should be. And I have other appraisers to bounce that off of. We keep a spreadsheet. When we see something unique, I can go in and take a look at, hey, typically in this zip code, I've been seeing, you know, $6,000 for a bath, but my market analysis on this one is showing 10. Why is it showing 10? And I can go in and I can dig through the last couple sales I've had in that market area. But we are constantly analyzing what our adjustments are specifically for each market area. You'll have areas that blow up, you'll have areas that boom. Bathroom on the main line for a $2 million house is typically worth more to a buyer than a bathroom in Upper Darby. Those markets do definitely impact what our adjustments are going to be, and figuring that out, like I said, it takes a lot of time and takes us a lot of work to make sure that we have the right paired sales going.
This is why I tell people appraisals usually don't come back in a day. This is a lot of work you guys have to do. We have a question in the chat. Robert wants to know, can you talk a little bit more about your approach to valuing below grade square footage?
So this is interesting, especially with the new ANSI rules that went into effect last year. We have ANSI measurement standards now. So anything that is 1 foot below grade on any wall is now considered basement area. So in the past, when I had a split level and maybe just the front wall was below grade, I could explain how a typical purchaser would consider a living area. Now with these new standards, that's finished basement. It's as soon as there's a foot below grade, it is considered finished basement area. What we typically see is what I typically try to do is I try to use houses of similar style. So if I'm using a split level and I'm only calling that main living area and the bedrooms living area and that lower level's finished basement, I'm trying to find other split levels that have similar, you know, areas on their in their properties, so that I can show a tit for tat adjustment of, I'm not just going to try to grab a rancher where the whole thing's below grade and there's no daylight down there and you can't walk out of it. I'm going to typically try to find something of a similar style so I can compare apples to apples.
Okay, Robert is asking again, specifically finished versus unfinished, and the differences in the quality of the finishes. Interesting, good question.
Okay. So yeah, so I don't get to go measure. So we do an adjustment based on whether or not they have a finished area. So my subject property might have 500 square feet of finished area. I don't get to go measure the comparables. So I have to assume I know how much of that area is finished, and then I make an adjustment for whether it's finished or not. As far as the quality of those finishes, it would most likely come into the overall quality or condition of the home adjustment. So yes, we could have things with drop ceilings, or you could have things that have, 10-foot ceilings with the built-in bars and movie theaters and everything else. I can sometimes make adjustments for the individual features if they have if they have a media room, for instance, or a cigar room or something along those lines. I can make those kind of adjustments for those features. But typically, it is just whether there's a finished basement or there's not. It's the presence or lack of finish.
Okay, good. Tobias, just, you had a long message here. Can you just ask, so I don't want to read it wrong. Can you just ask what your question is? We're starting to lose people, so I want to try to finish this up in the next couple of minutes.
Sorry, I was trying to ask before, but I thought they couldn't hear me for some reason.
No, I got you.
Okay. I say if I purchased a home last year, the house I bought it for 300,000, but the appraisal said it's worth more. Let's say a 3-bed, 3.5 bathrooms, right? They said it's worth more than what I paid for. But then when I update it to, let's say, some really nice updates to what the other houses in the area are, is it possible? And that house is now worth, let's say, almost $500,000. Sometimes I hear clients say, well, how could they buy it for that price last year and then try to sell it the next year, or let's say the next year, for that price? Isn't that possible, that it's just that the house was below grade, I guess?
Below value when you bought it.
Below
Absolutely.
value, yes.
So when I go out to do the appraisal, if I'm coming back out to look at it once you've renovated and updated it,
Mhm.
all I care about is what the other renovated and updated houses are selling for.
Okay.
So it does not matter to me what it sold for in the past. I did a refi on a house that I actually did the appraisal of about 8 months ago,
Mhm.
and they bought it for about 400 grand 8 months ago. They haven't touched it, but they've had 6 sales in the neighborhood that escalated their value all the way to 480. So
Right.
they came up 20% in 8 months solely
Wow.
because of what's sold in the neighborhood. They haven't even made an update to it. So all I care about is what the comparable sales are the day that I come out there.
Good question, Tobias.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no
All
problem.
right, so let's finish up here, because I know Dan has a meeting he delayed for us too. You could just
This
show
is-
them on John on the bottom of, because there's lots of numbers on here. The bottom part
I
is
think
really where.
this is important too, because most residential and homes that are being lent on, you're going to use the sales comparison approach as the way of getting the value. Some people see these cost approach, income approach. Typically, that's for mixed use or commercial, but you're always going to fall typically in the sales comparison approach. So John can touch on that as well.
So yeah, sales comparison is what usually our final opinion of value comes from. The cost approach is used to support it, especially on things like new construction. So that's typically when we use the cost approach, is if I'm appraising a new construction home, the lender wants to see, what the actual cost for that build is. And then the income approach, I only ever use it on multifamily homes. So rental properties, things like that, is where I'm typically even developing the income approach. But for the most part, 99% of our work is mortgage work, and the mortgage company really only cares about whether or not they can resell this property if it gets defaulted on. So they want the sales comparison approach to be the most important, and the one that I put the most weight on. For that next section, this is whether the report's as is, if it needs to have repairs. So if it's subject to repairs, that's typically what I need to come back out. If it's subject to a certification, that means that there might be like frayed electrical wiring or a plumbing leak. something like that where I need a professional to come out and certify that it's in good condition, or I make it subject to plans and specs. So this is new construction, your renovation loans, things like that, where I'm valuing the property as if those renovations were complete.
Okay, so that value is going to be on the bottom of page 2. The other
Yep.
pages are usually pictures and comparable properties, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, a little
then you'll
bit. There's
see
a
all that.
cost approach and things like that, but nothing that your typical that's going to really have an impact on your typical purchase.
Yep.
Okay, well, this is great. Anyone have any other questions? I learned
I have
something. I
one.
don't know about you all.
I have one question, if I could.
Go
Sure.
ahead.
Just as far as the searching goes, like we have a lot of HOAs and homeowner associations in Monroe County, Carbon County, and
Yep.
typically the appraisals are done within those. But then you have those properties that are outside of an HOA. I was just curious, do you do a radius search? Like how far out from the subject
So
can you consider a compare?
So we usually start at 1 mile so that I can find hopefully the most proximate and recent sales available. If I don't find enough sales to come up with a credible value, then I start to expand that search. So, and I will go as far as the boundaries of the school district. So if you're a unique property that's not in an HOA, maybe you're on larger than typical land site size, or it's a larger than typical gross living area, I will go throughout the school district for the last 12 months. That said, I'm not going, if you're a typical home and I have 6 sales within a mile, I'm probably not going out 5 miles
All right.
to grab something else just because it makes value.
Gotcha.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, Dan, John, I can't thank you enough. This was extremely educational. I think we learned a little bit of appraisals and a little bit on the mortgage end. Any final questions before we finish this up?
Will this
I
be
have
on the
one.
YouTube channel?
I'm sorry, Tobias.
Will this be on the YouTube channel?
I'm going to actually go on the YouTube when it's put on from Colleen, and I'm going to send it out to everyone just so you can go back and refer if you need, because some people couldn't make it. So I'll be sending it out to all of you probably tomorrow when I get the link. So don't you worry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Robin, did you have a question?
Did John leave already?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, he's right
Okay.
there.
So I have a question. So on the market analysis side, you're saying would it be safe to, if we couldn't find comps within an HOA, we could go outside of an HOA to get comps?
As long
I'm
as there
basing that
are,
on what you're saying.
as long as if there's 6 sales in your HOA, I'm probably using those 6 sales.
But
So-
what if there wasn't?
So if there are none, then yes, then I have to go outside of it. So that's when I start to expand that search radius. And
So
I
it
would
would be
go,
safe for us within a market analysis to do that if we couldn't find anything within the community.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd be looking for the most similar things. So if your home is in an HOA that was built in the 90s, and they're all about 2,000 to 2,400 square feet, I'm gonna look for a similar community. So, yeah, so I'm gonna try to find the most similar house I can in your school district.
Yeah, typically appraisers are looking everything within a mile, and everything within the last 6 months is the best case scenario. That's you're looking for recent sales within that mile radius. That being said, there's certain markets where it's not possible, like John said. We've had appraisals where they're using comps 30, 40 miles away because there's just nothing like that property in that area. And those are the reports you see, those crazy adjustments and things all over the place, because it's just a very complex assignment, complex property. But typically most appraisers are going to want to stick in that 6-month range as well as 1 mile. And even the lenders will come back on these sometimes and ask for the appraisers to expand that search to get, a specific feature on a home that's like a log cabin or something like that. They want to have something, whether it's an ADU accessory unit, they want to have something, one comp that has the similar feature, even if it's expanding outside of that mile range.
But it should never go outside of the school district? Is that what you're saying?
I've gone outside the school district once in my 19 years of doing this, and that was for we had a 60-acre farm in Upper Bucks County that I went outside the school district just because there were no sales.
That's unique.
Yes.
I have a question for Dan and John real quick so we can finish this up. Dan, is it okay if I I know you're always looking for really good appraisers to go on to your what's it called, roster. So if you guys know any appraisers that are looking for a good company to work for, Dan is amazing. And John, if you can maybe put in the chat your contact information.
Yep.
If you guys are looking for an appraiser that do it like a pre-listing or a for sale by owner, Dan,
Perfect.
I think they're allowed to reach out to John directly for
For
something
sure.
like
Yes.
that that's not mortgage related.
sure.
John, just for taking the time here. I tried to do this for a year and I could not get an appraiser to come on. I can't thank you enough. This was great. I'm sure everybody can agree. It was a
Yep.
fantastic class.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for the difficulties in the beginning, but yeah, if you ever need me again, just call me. I'll be happy to jump on another Zoom or come in and do a lunch and learn in person, whatever you want me to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. You guys have a great day, and I'll be sending this recording out when I get it from Colleen.
Don't forget to
Perfect.
contact.
Thanks,
us.
Maria.
Thank you.
Guys.
Welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks,
Thanks,
John.
guys.
His name, John Fields. John Fields. Can't hear you.
Hi, are you there, Glenn?
Yep.
Yeah.
here.
So I can't figure out how to get in the chat, but Maria has all my contact info. She's more than welcome to share it with you. And
Okay.
then I can tell you right now, if you want to write it down, we're fieldsappraisers@gmail.com. And you can find us online, fieldsappraisers.com.
Give me 1 second. Field appraiser, FIELD, field appraisers.
FIELDS, like my last name, Fields.
Field appraisals.
Appraisers.
Okay.
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Okay. And you were John Fields.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. It was nice talking with all of you. And again, if you can use that email, if you have any questions, just give me a shout.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Hey,
Yep.
John, you got 1 second? One quick
Yeah.
question.